It's one of nature's cruelest ironies. The same forests that symbolize peace, beauty, and escape can also become places of unimaginable horror. Beneath the whisper of leaves and the scent of pine, tragedy often hides in silence. For some, what began as a simple hike, a photo trip, or a weekend adventure turned into a nightmare that no one could have predicted. These are the 5 most painful forest deaths ever, chilling stories that remind us that nature's calm can turn deadly in an instant.
A deadly attack by a bear in North Jersey has residents worried tonight. They gathered in West Milford to discuss what authorities are calling the first fatal bear attack in the state's history.
It was supposed to be just another Sunday hike. 22-year-old Rutgers University student Darsh Patel and his 4 friends had in mind when they set off into the thick, whispering woods of the Upshawa Preserve in West Milford, New Jersey. The group had never been there before, but their spirits were high. Then, somewhere along one of the narrow paths, they saw a black bear standing still in the distance, just watching them. It was about 100 feet away, a powerful creature, motionless, its dark eyes fixed on them. Instead of backing away, the group hesitated. Maybe it was curiosity, or that strange sense of invincibility that young people carry, the belief that danger is always somewhere else. Phones came out. They took pictures, even a few selfies. The bear was behind them in the frame, a blurry shape among the trees. But in those frozen moments, captured through the lens, danger was already moving closer. At first, the bear seemed calm. It lumbered forward slowly, deliberately, as if testing their reaction. Then, its posture changed. It began walking with purpose, no longer curious but intent. That's when panic took over. The hikers screamed and ran in different directions, scattering through the woods. Someone yelled to climb, someone else to run downhill. Leaves crunched, branches snapped, and within seconds the group was separated. Darsh was the last one anyone saw. He was running down a separate trail, turning once to yell at his friends to keep going. Those were his final words. The others made it out to the edge of the preserve and waited, out of breath, shaken but alive. They waited for Dar to appear. Minutes passed, then an hour. He never came. That's when they called the police. When investigators combed the scene, they found Darsh's phone, cracked and smeared with dirt, and one chilling detail that froze them in place. The phone had fang marks on it. The bear had bitten it. Inside the damaged device were a series of photos, the same ones Darsh had taken just before the attack. In those haunting images, the bear could be seen behind a fallen tree, each shot showing it getting closer and closer, until there was no space left between hunter and hunted. The autopsy revealed something even more painful. None of Darsh's injuries were immediately fatal. He had died from blood loss, conscious through the attack. He had fought, cried out, and slowly slipped away as the forest swallowed his screams. Forensic tests later showed that the bear had ingested human tissue and clothing, confirming it was the same animal responsible. When news broke, it sent shockwaves across the country. The photos released by West Milford police told the story in fragments: a calm forest, a curious bear, a few careless moments, and then tragedy. For New Jersey, it was a grim first, the first fatal bear attack in over 150 years. Experts later said the bear's behavior was highly unusual. It wasn't hungry, it wasn't protecting cubs. It had simply stalked the group, followed them, tested their reaction, and then attacked. Wildlife officials called it stalking-type behavior, something almost unheard of in black bears, which typically avoid humans. In the months that followed, Upshawa Preserve became a place people whispered about hikers passing the trail where Darsh's life ended with lowered voices and uneasy glances at the trees. His photos, now part of the police report, remain some of the most chilling ever taken in the wild. The final record of a young man's last moments, preserved forever inside the very device that bore the mark of the beast that killed him.
Back when we were allowed to travel, there were places in popular movies that really pulled people in, like the Iowa farm in Field of Dreams.
He called himself Alexander Supertramp, a name that sounded more like a legend than a man. To Christopher McCandless, none of that mattered. What mattered was escape from the noise, the lies, the comfort that numbed the soul. After graduating from Emory University, Chris donated his $24,000 savings to charity, packed a small bag, and vanished. No map, no plan, just a belief that truth could only be found where the road ended. Along the way, he crossed deserts and cities under false names, working odd jobs and sleeping under the stars. His journals brimmed with quotes from Tolstoy, Thoreau, and Jack London, men who also sought purity in the wilderness. By April 1992, Chris reached Alaska, the place that had haunted his imagination. Locals remembered him as a wiry young man with restless eyes and a backpack far too small for the wild ahead. When a truck driver named Jim Gallion offered him a ride to the Stampede Trail, he warned him he wasn't prepared. Chris smiled and said, "I'll be fine," before stepping into the white silence of Alaska. It was April 28, 1992, the last day anyone would see him alive. After miles of hiking, he stumbled upon an old abandoned Fairbanks City bus. Its frame rusted, its tires sunken into the moss. It had once served as a miner's shelter, but to him, it was destiny. He painted "Magic Bus" on its side and made it his home. Inside, he hunted small game, read for hours, and filled his notebook with joy and wonder, the freedom he'd always dreamed of. But as weeks turned into months, nature's beauty revealed its cruelty. Food became scarce. He shot a moose, but without refrigeration or salt, the meat spoiled within days. "One of the greatest tragedies of my life," he wrote. Hunger began to consume him. Searching the woods for plants, he may have eaten toxic wild potato seeds, slowly poisoning his body and blocking nutrition. By late July, the once shallow river he'd crossed had turned into a raging torrent from melted snow. He tried to escape, but couldn't. The wilderness that had once welcomed him had become his cage. In his journal, his handwriting grew shaky prayers for help, short sentences, then silence. The last photo he took is haunting. Gaunt but peaceful, he holds a note. "I have had a happy life, and thank the Lord. Goodbye, and may God bless all." When hunters found the bus in September, they discovered his body in a blue sleeping bag. He weighed just 67 pounds. The coroner ruled starvation. His final journal entry marked day 113, a countdown to nothing. In her memoir, Corinne McCandless revealed the pain that haunted him, the violence and hypocrisy at home. Perhaps the wilderness was his way of cleansing it, a place to start over. John Krakauer's book, Into the Wild, turned his journey into a haunting symbol of freedom and idealism. The Magic Bus became a shrine where people left notes and prayers. And maybe the most haunting thought is this, that in those final days, as the wind whispered through the cracks of the bus, Chris McCandless finally found what he was seeking all along: absolute solitude. The silence where life and death meet.
Gabrielle "Gabby" Petito was reported missing on September 11, 2021, 10 days after her fiancé and traveling companion Brian Laundrie returned home to Florida from the couple's road trip.
Gabby Petito was the kind of girl whose smile could light up your phone screen. A 22-year-old travel vlogger chasing the dream of van life, exploring the vast beauty of America with her fiancé, Brian Laundrie. Together, they painted the picture of a perfect couple, their Instagram full of sunsets, laughter, and adventure. But behind the filters and captions, something dark was unraveling. It began in July 2021. Gabby and Brian packed up their white Ford Transit van and hit the open road. Utah, Colorado, Wyoming. Every stop was another story, another photograph, another video of young love in motion. But beneath the curated beauty, arguments had already begun. Witnesses later told police they saw the two fighting outside a store in Moab, Utah. A 911 caller even reported that a man had slapped a woman. When officers pulled them over, Gabby was in tears, shaking, her words tumbling out between sobs. She blamed herself, said she had OCD, that she was stressed from trying to make her blog perfect. The body cam footage would later go viral. Millions would watch, unaware they were seeing the beginning of the end. The police separated them for the night, calling it a mental health episode, not domestic violence. Gabby slept alone in the van. Brian got a motel room. The next morning, they reunited and continued on their trip, and from that moment on, the road only grew darker. By late August, Gabby was no longer posting regularly. Her mother's texts went unanswered. Then came a strange message from Gabby's phone. "Can you help Stan? I just keep getting his voicemails." Stan was Gabby's grandfather, and she never called him by his first name. That single message sent a chill through her mother. Something wasn't right. On August 27th, witnesses saw Gabby and Brian arguing again, this time at a restaurant in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Brian was described as aggressive, yelling at staff. Gabby came back inside, crying and apologizing. Hours later, dashcam footage from another YouTube couple captured their van parked quietly in the woods near the Spread Creek camping area, the same place where Gabby's body would soon be found. Brian returned home to Florida on September 1st, alone, in Gabby's van. He didn't call her family. He didn't file a missing person report. He simply unpacked, spent time with his parents, and went camping. Days passed. Gabby's family, growing desperate, finally contacted the police. The story exploded across the nation. Every news outlet covered it. On September 19th, searchers in Wyoming's Bridger-Teton National Forest made a grim discovery. Hidden among the tall grass near a campsite lay the remains of a young woman. It was Gabby. The autopsy revealed blunt force trauma and strangulation. She had been dead for weeks. While America mourned Gabby, Brian vanished. He left home on September 13th, telling his parents he was going for a hike. He never came back. Days turned into weeks as authorities scoured Florida's Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park. His parents remained silent, fueling public outrage. Then, on October 20th, search teams found what was left of his skeletal remains: a backpack, a revolver, and a soaked notebook. Inside that notebook was his confession. He admitted to killing Gabby. His version of events painted a twisted picture that he did it out of mercy, that she was hurt and he wanted to end her suffering. But investigators and experts saw through it. It was a desperate lie from a man trying to justify the unjustifiable. He ended his note by writing that he couldn't live without her and took his own life with a gun.
Not me. Hi.
For 13 summers, Timothy Treadwell lived where few dared, deep in Alaska's Katmai wilderness, surrounded by giants with claws the size of knives and tempers as wild as the land itself. He called them friends. He gave them names. He believed they loved him. To the world, he was the Bear Man, a modern-day hermit who had traded cities for solitude and found peace among predators. By October 2003, the wilderness was changing. The grizzlies were restless, lean, and hungry. Winter was closing in fast. Most bears had already vanished into hibernation, but the ones left behind were desperate, scavenging, unpredictable, and dangerous. Still, Timothy refused to leave. His girlfriend, Amy Huguenard, a physician assistant who had joined him on his final expedition, was terrified. She had begged him to go home. They were supposed to be on a flight back to California. Their tickets were booked. Their bags were packed. But a simple argument with an airline clerk changed everything. Furious and stubborn, Treadwell made a choice that would seal their fate. He would return to the park. Just one more week, he told Amy. One more week with the bears. One last chance to find a female bear he hadn't seen that season. They pitched their tent near a salmon stream, a feeding ground known to attract the biggest bears. But that year, the salmon were scarce, and hunger makes even the calmest creature unpredictable. The bears that now haunted the riverbanks weren't the ones Timothy knew. They didn't recognize his voice, his scent, or his self-proclaimed friendship. In one of his last recordings, Timothy captured a massive, gaunt grizzly prowling near camp, its ribs showing through its fur, its movements erratic. He called the bear Mr. Chocolate. To him, it was another companion. To everyone else, it was a warning. On October 5th, Timothy made his last call. A brief chat with a friend in Malibu. He sounded calm, content. He talked about the weather, the bears, and their plans to fly home soon. There was no fear in his voice, no sign that death was already waiting in the shadows. The next day, when a bush pilot arrived to pick them up, something felt wrong. The camp was eerily quiet. No movement, no greeting. Then, as the pilot approached, he saw the tent flattened, gear shredded, earth torn apart. A massive grizzly lingered nearby, its fur slick and dark around the mouth. When rangers arrived, what they found was beyond anything they had ever seen. Scattered across the campsite were the remains of Timothy Treadwell. A few feet away, Amy's body lay half-buried under a thin covering of soil and leaves. The grizzly guarding the site was shot and killed. Later, another bear charged at the cleanup team and was put down as well. Inside the first bear's stomach, investigators found human remains, fingers, flesh, and bones from both Timothy and Amy. But the most haunting discovery wasn't the bodies, it was the camera. It had been running, the lens cap still on, but the audio was intact. 6 minutes of pure horror screams, roars, pleading, chaos. The recording begins with Timothy shouting, "I'm being killed out here." Amy's voice cuts through the panic, desperate, begging him to play dead. You can hear the growl of the bear, the sounds of struggle, then silence. For a moment, it seems over until the bear comes back. The screams return, louder, blood-curdling. Then nothing. When filmmaker Werner Herzog listened to the tape years later, he described it as the most terrifying thing I have ever heard. He refused to include it in his documentary Grizzly Man. He told the owner of the tape to destroy it. Some things, he said, were never meant for human ears. In May 1996, Julie Williams and Laura Lolly Wienans pitched their tent beside a secluded mountain stream, surrounded by the kind of beauty that makes the world feel safe again. But in the stillness of that forest, something else was waiting, something that wanted them dead. Julie was 24, Lolly 26. Adventurous, bright, and deeply in love. They shared a golden retriever named Taj, who followed them loyally through every path and puddle. Julie was days away from starting a new job in Vermont, her life stretching ahead like a sunrise, but she never made it to that job. Instead, her name would echo through decades of unsolved files and unanswered questions. They entered the park on May 19th, registering their permits and setting off with the kind of excitement only the wilderness can inspire. Days passed. They changed their route after heavy rain, laughing it off, adjusting their plans. On May 24th, a ranger gave them a ride the last time anyone would see them alive. Then, they disappeared into the trees. For nearly a week, no one noticed. Families assumed they were still hiking. Friends thought they were unplugged from the world. But on May 31st, something shifted. Julie's father grew uneasy when she was supposed to call about her new job. When she didn't, he knew something was wrong. The search began. Rangers found the women's car parked neatly near Skyland Lodge, but there was no sign of them. Then came the first real clue. Taj, their golden retriever, wandering the woods alone, trembling and hungry. Something terrible had happened. The next morning, searchers moved deeper into the forest. The air grew heavier. Then, amid the pines, they found the tent and the truth. What they saw was unspeakable. Julie and Lolly lay bound and gagged, side by side, their lives brutally taken. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a robbery. It was rage. A controlled, intimate cruelty that made even seasoned investigators turn pale. The women had fought for their lives. They had seen their killer, and the forest had swallowed his footsteps whole. Detectives scoured every lead, every stranger seen near the trail. A camera recovered from the scene showed Julie and Lolly smiling just days before Carefree, arms wrapped around each other, unaware that death was watching from the trees. The investigation soon focused on a man named Daryl David Rice, a computer technician with a violent past and a documented hatred for women. He'd been seen in the park that same week. In his van, authorities found restraints eerily similar to those used in the murders. And when Rice made a vile comment about the victim's sexuality, prosecutors were convinced they had their man. For a moment, it looked like justice was within reach. But then, science shattered the illusion. DNA from the crime scene didn't match Rice or the victims. It matched no one in the system. The case collapsed. The charges were dropped, and the killer, whoever he was, vanished back into the shadows. For nearly 30 years, Julie and Lolly's families were trapped in the same haunting loop of endless grief, endless questions, no answers. The trail grew cold. The forest moved on, but the story never stopped echoing through the hearts of those who loved them. Who would do something like this? Why them? Why there? Then, almost 3 decades later, a whisper from the past turned into revelation. In 2024, advancements in forensic DNA tracing reopened the case. This time, the evidence led somewhere new to a man named Walter Leo Jackson, a convicted serial molester with a history of brutal attacks on women. He had been hiding in plain sight for years, but there was a twist even more cruel than the crime itself. Jackson was already dead. He had died in prison in 2018, taking his secrets with him. When investigators confirmed the match, the families wept not out of relief, but out of exhaustion. The monster had finally been unmasked, but justice was a ghost. There would be no trial, no confession, no closure.